Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you to thrive as peculiar people in a modern world. And today we're doing that by talking to a farmer named Keizer and his wife Rachel. And they're going to talk to us all about the miracles and visions and dreams that they had surrounding the birth of their son. And kind of throughout their lives. Keizer will talk to us about visions he's seen throughout his life. Rachel, her family has seen angels and other things, but a lot of it is surrounding this event, this birth. Before we get into this episode, here's a quick note from the people that make it possible, Shepherd's Crook Coffee. Now, if you have not tried this coffee yet, you're missing out. Some people can't drink coffee anymore because it bothers them gastrointestinally. But Shepherd's Crook Coffee roasts on an air roaster, not the drum like many people. And the air roasting process results in a lower acidic coffee. And a lot of people who weren't able to drink coffee before are now able to drink coffee again with Shepherd's Crook Coffee. They have some gorgeous roasts. My particular favorite is the Peru. It's the darkest roast they have. Shepherd's Crook Coffee is a Torah-Observant coffee roasting small business. Owners Greg and Laura make sure that the growers are following organic processes, whether they're too small to have the certification or not. Getting you the healthy beans that you want at $11.99 a bag. Plus, with the 25% off that you get with code THELIFE, it's $8.99 a bag. Look at the crema on this coffee. It's gorgeous. I cannot tell you how much better this coffee is than all of the stuff I was getting at the store. If you go to shepherdscrookcoffee.com, you'll get 25% off your first order with code THELIFE. If you love what we're doing, please like this video, share, and subscribe. These words, you hear all YouTubers say them all the time, and it's because it helps that YouTube channel if you do these things. And it helps not just grow the audience, but it helps get this information in front of more people. So join us and do that, please. Rachel and Keizer, welcome to the Life Podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So can you please tell the audience who you are, and then tell us a little bit about your testimony of becoming believers and then eventually how you came into the Torah?
I grew up on a farm most all my life, and I became a believer probably around I was 13. Kind of an odd story. I actually tested God a little bit. I had a cow that genetically was kind of impossible to have a red cow. And I was in a point in time when I was trying to see if he was really real. And so I devoted my time in prayer and reading the Word every day. And all I asked is for him to show me, and I'll completely devote myself to him, if he would give me a red calf. And that was a process about 6 months of doing. And well, he gave me a red calf. So from that point on, I know he is real, and that's how I kind of walked into my faith.
How old were you there? That's crazy. There's so many, I think of all my little tests that I did when I was a kid, and none of them were answered. But how old were you when this happened?
I would have been around 13, 14. I was, old enough that I had seen my faith through my parents walking out and understood how I understood what I was taught and how good God was, but I had never really seen it. And I decided to take it for myself because I was, as my mom would put it, a little bit of a difficult child before I actually gave my life to Christ. So, it was just it was a blessing from God that he answered my prayer the way he did. So.
What was your reaction when the baby comes out and it's red? Were you like, did you freak out? What'd you do?
Well, I was pretty excited. yeah, I was ecstatic about the whole thing because the whole time I told my parents about what I was doing, and my my dad, was like, yeah, trust in God 100%, but don't be disappointed if it doesn't happen. And we came home, and it was a cold winter night, and I seen that she had a calf. We hadn't seen the baby yet, but I just knew it was red because I believed so much. And my dad's like, well, I mean, okay, and we seen it, and I was through the moon. I was ecstatic. My parents were blown away, and there was a lot of excitement. You about couldn't hold me in the pickup, and it was 0 degrees outside with the snow blowing. So it was, yeah, very excited to see that. Oh.
Wow. Okay. Well, then, should we proceed through your life until you meet Rachel, or should we jump over to Rachel, or how do you guys want to
We
tell it?
can.
Yeah, we can start from kind of where we met. So I grew up in Michigan, but when I moved out here and we met, I was keeping Torah. My family had started keeping Torah when I was in my teen years. So when we met, that was like the first thing. When he wanted to date me, I was like, listen, I believe this and this and this, and I'm not going to date you if you don't, allow me to believe this way. I'm going to keep Sabbath. I'm going to keep the feast. And so we studied it out together. Well, the reason that I knew he was the one was I was so ready for him to be like, you're nuts. Like, what are you talking about? But he was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I wondered about keeping those laws. And I was like, sure. He's going to go home and never call me again. But he did. He called me back and we studied it out. And then when we got married, he saw it all. Like, he saw, okay, yes, the laws never were done away with, but he wasn't keeping it at that time. It was just like, well, I'm a farmer. I don't see how that's possible. You can do it, but it's not something I'm going to keep right now. And so that's kind of
At what point in your dating relationship did this happen? And can you describe for us the conversation, how you actually asked him this?
So this was technically, we hadn't even been on a first date. I just asked her, we were going to a friend's house, and I asked if she wanted to ride over there with me. And I mean, I had asked her out already, and but yeah, so we're in the car, and she's like, listen, if this is even going to happen, you need to know that this is non-negotiable. I see doing the Torah this way, and the laws are still there. And I was like, well, I'm cool with that. For me, it was very important. As long as she knew that Christ was her savior and that she didn't need these other things to save her, I was fine. And two, I had, I think 4 or 5 years earlier, I had been reading the scripture, and I'd been reading through all the laws and the food laws, and there was a point in time for me when I had, at that early time, was reading through it, and I got done reading through all the food laws, and I thought to myself, I wonder if we should still be keeping those. And I remember hearing an audible, a voice in my head say yes, and I was like, oh. But I didn't understand a lot of it, so I was kind of like, no, I think I heard wrong. And so then, you go back to when I met Rachel, I was like, well, okay. Didn't really correlate the two, but it didn't bother me. So.
Wow, man. Yeah, when you look back on your life, same thing happened to me. When my mom started doing this stuff and called me and said she wasn't going to do Christmas, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And that was the first, when I looked back on it, I was like, that's the first time I ever encountered any of this. But I totally forgot about this guy, this motorcycle gang looking guy who cornered me in a basement one time and told me the whole spiel of the Torah of Yeshua and all this stuff, but it like just was blotted out of my brain somehow. It was too much of a download. But when you look back, you're like, oh yes, now I see. I had, like, for you read the food laws, and okay, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, nope. I mean, yeah, it was just, there's, like you're saying, over my life, there's been a progression of little things that God has been showing me. And so yeah, when we met, we said it was okay. We dated for a little bit.
Very, very little bit.
Very little bit. Yeah, 3 months? And got married 3 months later.
Yeah, so it was like 6 months.
So 6 months of total dating. And yeah, and so that's kind of how it progressed. But the whole time, she kept it, and I was cool with it. But then I did the feast with her, celebrated. But
except for when whenever harvest came up, you were like, oh no, I can't quit harvest.
I mean, that's a very busy time of year for a farmer.
True.
And yes, it took, what was it? It was about 3 years.
Well, so when did you have your vision of the boys? Because that's kind of like where it starts.
So shortly after we got married, we'd gotten pregnant with our oldest. And before we even knew what he was, this is kind of getting into the story of Zephaniah. Gender, I mean. We know it was a baby, of course.
It was a human. They're like, I hope it's a human.
Yeah. Some days I wonder. But no, he's good. He's good. So before we knew what gender he was, I had this vision. And it came to me about 3 times. And in this vision, me and my eldest son came, and it was 2 different scenarios. Me and my eldest son came, we were in a hospital, and we walked to a hospital room where Rachel and Zephaniah were. In the first scenario, we stood at the door, and all we could do is see him. We couldn't go to him. All I could explain, there was a bright light around them. They were safe, but we could not go to them. And with that, I came to the conclusion that in that scenario, she had passed. Her and my middle child had passed away. In the second scenario, it was just me walking to the hospital room. I came to the door. My oldest was already in there embracing him. Rachel and baby were good, and I was able to go to him as well. That's all I had. I had no distinguishing between what changed one scenario from another. What was it that allowed them to live, and what was it that they passed away?
At the time.
At the time, I didn't know. That didn't get told to me until after Zephaniah was born, which would have been, from that point, 3 years later. Roughly about 3 years. So when
we got pregnant with our first, you knew it was going to be a boy.
I knew it was going to be a boy. I also had a pretty good idea that my second child was going to be a boy, because they were both boys in the vision. And so yeah, fast forward, we keep.
So you weren't keeping Torah when we had our first, and then we were trying to get pregnant with our second, which was actually pretty difficult. We had like 1.5 years of trying before we got pregnant with the second child.
And the other thing with the vision, I knew that the kids were roughly 3 years apart. So even though she was getting discouraged, I had the vision in the back of my mind, like, I don't think we have to worry. I think the second one's coming in this time frame. And he did.
This episode of the Life Podcast is brought to you by Truth Tracks. Truth Tracks are these small, beautifully illustrated comics full of scripture that use stories to tell why it is that we're doing different things that we're doing that we see in the scriptures, like, you know, different, like the holidays in the Bible, or like wearing tzitzit, or like eating biblically clean. And it puts all of the scriptures at your fingertips that you want to have when somebody's asking you about these things, and you can just hand this to them and they can read it on their own time and look up the scriptures and kind of understand what you're saying. And they're tiny, you can keep them with you, and just kind of handy. It's not like a big thing to ask of someone. It's not saying, hey, read this whole book or watch this whole movie. It's saying, read this. This will kind of explain where I'm coming from.
Did the two possible scenarios in that vision cause you any angst at all? Were you like, well, what's up with the one vision where I think she's dead? What did you think about that?
When I got pregnant with Zephaniah.
When she got pregnant, you know, during, it was again one of those things, like I kept it in the back of my mind, but I didn't think about it. But when things started playing out to the vision and she got pregnant again, I was like, this might be something to consider. And so, yeah, there was a lot of fear with that one for me, because there was just a lot of unknown. I'm sitting there thinking, well, what keeps her alive, and what killed her? Yeah. And is there something on my end? I mean, what is the difference between the two? And it, for the most part, the pregnancy went really well, all the way up to birth.
Yeah, but you were worried because you told, like, we went to the hospital with our firstborn, and then we were having a home birth with the second, and he kept saying, like, he's worried or he's concerned, and he would ask the midwife, like, you'll know if there's a problem or whatever. And I just thought it was, like, normal, like, every husband's nervous when their wife is having a baby, you know. And it was, so we were pregnant with Zephaniah, and that's when you decided to start keeping Torah for real.
It was about 3 months before he was born when God started showing me a lot of, I guess, opening my eyes to the importance of keeping Sabbath and keeping his ways. And that was a really high mark. I mean, it was really wonderful to get to experience God showing me, or lifting the scales off my eyes to see his truth and his word. It was also in the time, so we kind of swapped back and forth on naming the children a little bit. She named our oldest after me, and I was like, that's fine, I'm going to get named the next one. And I had a name picked out for him.
I didn't like.
She absolutely did not like. I think, what was it, Zedro?
Yeah.
Elisha, Carmen. Just an oddball name. And I was reading the word again, and again I was sitting there, and God said, you're going to name him Zephaniah Elijah. And I remember sitting there thinking, no, again, that voice, like, I'm not so sure about that. But I sat there and I prayed and talked with him a little bit more, and again, it was Zephaniah Elijah is his name. And so I turned to Rachel and I said, what do you think of Zephaniah Elijah?
I was like, yep.
And she was all for it.
Anything but Zethro, please.
That's right. And again, that was happening through his pregnancy. She was about 6 months along, right around all the same time that I started keeping Torah, or for myself. But again, at this time, I still didn't know the difference of the scenarios. We just kind of had to keep going. I do know in the time that I decided to keep Torah, the spiritual warfare was very great in the house. Many attacks from Satan. It was kind of an intense and scary time. I think in those last 3 months, we had multiple times where I had to cast demons out in the middle of the night, because they would come in on me and put pressure on my chest, and tell me things like we will destroy you, and there were I slept with lights on a lot.
And our oldest son, he was about 3, and he was having terrible night terrors. And we would have to go in his room and cast things out as well. And we just prayed a lot of protection over the house.
Had that ever happened to you guys before? And what was the thing that finally removed that?
Just the constant praise songs, praying for Yeshua to be here with us at all time, angels, and casting him out in Yeshua's name was what did it. And it really wasn't an instant. I mean, it still happened after Zephaniah's birth, but it was really strong up to his birth. But there was about a month or a couple weeks before his birth, there were 2 angels that were sent.
So my brother came out and stayed with us before Zephaniah was born, and then a little bit after. And he said, like, we didn't know at the time, but he said when he came, he asked Jehovah God to send him 2 angels to protect him while he was here. And we didn't know, but later after Zephaniah's birth, my sister, my whole family ended up coming out after, and she's like, oh, there's angels here. And my brother's like, yeah, I asked Jehovah to send them. So they had been here for about 6 months maybe before his birth, or 3 months, whenever Jeremiah came out.
What do you mean your sister said, oh, there's angels here? Did she see them?
Yeah, and that'll be later on in the story too.
Oh.
I'll tell you. Yeah, I've never seen, like, I don't see spiritual things like that. But my older sister, she sees a lot of the spiritual world, and so that's kind of later in the story, though.
But yeah, with him coming, so and to this day, as far as we know, those 2 angels are still here, keeping watch over the house. But yeah, they came. There were still, I mean, so that did help a lot with the spiritual warfare, but it was still great. Going into the birth, what I didn't realize, or progressing on to his birth, the day came, things weren't going very well. You ended up being 5 days overdue.
No, I was like 2 weeks.
2 weeks overdue.
2 weeks overdue, and
labor
was like, so with my first, I ended up having a C-section. So they told me, like, expect, like, it to be later, and, like, everything's gonna go slow. So I'd been in labor for like days, and it was just not progressing. Like, I was having contractions, the water had broke, things seemed off, but we didn't know how labor went, so it was kind of like, oh, we just keep waiting. Kind of kept trusting, and you know, and the whole time I kept asking, like, is there a problem? What do we need to do? But through a lot of that time, there seemed to have been a blinder on everybody's eyes. Yeah, because my mom was there, and she wasn't a doula at the time, but my mom's been to a lot of births, and she's a doula now. And she's like, man, after the fact, she's like, why did we not see, like, something was happening or something was going on, and why did the midwife not see? It was like everyone couldn't see, like, something is wrong here. So yeah, and so you ended up being, like, in fairly hard labor for 2 hours.
No, you were an all night. It was like a 24-hour period.
Yeah, but it was like that pushing, like that. I had been pushing for 2 hours.
Yeah.
When it happened.
And but yeah, up until, I mean, there just things didn't seem right, but nobody was aware of it. And finally, she it was pushed to the point that she had a stroke. So yeah, I was being told to push, but I was like, something wasn't right, and I was trying to, like, communicate that, but I was also like, oh, we're so close, and, like,
on my part, this is where I feel like I was Rebecca, like from the Bible. I feel like the whole time leading up to Zephaniah's birth, I was like, I'm gonna have a home birth. I'm gonna have this natural birth. I'm gonna do this. And maybe God would have granted me that if I didn't put it all on myself. I feel like this was my, like, one of my flaws in, like, this story is that, like, I feel like I thought I could do it. And I feel like sometimes in, like, the all-natural world, we do that. We think, oh, I can do this. And I didn't put it in God's hands. And so I just kept telling myself all throughout the labor, like, I just need to keep going. I just need to keep going. And he'll be here and I'll have done it. And so it got to this point where all of a sudden I looked at my left hand and it wasn't moving. And I was like, well, that's not right. And so I look over at, like, my mom and Kaiser, who are right in front of me. And I said, I can't move my hand. And they said, like, the left side of my face just dropped. And I was speaking in slurred speech. And I just saw their faces look terrified. And I fell at that point and went into a seizure. So I had a stroke and then a seizure right then.
Mm-hmm.
And
you were standing? You were standing at this point, or you were?
I was sitting.
She was sitting, but we caught her when she had the stroke, and then her seizure got so bad that we had to lay her on the floor and try to just hold her. But yeah, it would. And for me, I had kind of seen seizures, but never been like that close to one, and it was bad, and even to the point that I was holding her head, and it felt like she had basically stopped breathing, and at that point in time, I lost it. Turns out I have a flight mechanism at certain points, so I was jolted out, screaming hysterically. Because, I'm, a lot of emotions, not really sure what to think. All I'm thinking about is that vision of why, what did we not do that she didn't get saved? And,
well, right then,
and so a lot of, they were, your mom was there helping, she kept her cool.
Well, and so my mom was there praying over me, and she heard next to her someone praying in Hebrew, and she understood, like, what the person was saying, and she was like, she said her initial thought was, oh, the midwife knows Hebrew? And she's like, then she looked over, and it was an angel over top of me praying in Hebrew, and I can't remember what she said it was saying. She told me back then, like, what she heard it saying, like, she could translate it, but and she was just, like, in shock. And I know she was saying, because I did wake up at that time, and my mom was just saying, Lord, if you take her, I'll still praise you. And so I did wake up, and you came back. You
woke up. My parents, we just live right across the yard from my parents, so they heard me when I was hollering. They come running down.
We live, like, not close to town. Like, we're an hour from the nearest hospital
that would be able to do a C-section. And so came back in the house. I'd calmed down. They said Rachel was asking for me. So I came back down. And honestly, from the time that they called, all this happened, they called the ambulance. The ambulance was out here.
So fast.
Because we do live close to another town 15 miles away that has an ambulance. And so they were here within 10 minutes, 8 minutes. They were very quick. And so they were getting her loaded up. I ended up leaving before them because Rachel's mom was riding in the ambulance. So I was going to meet him at the hospital. And I
had another seizure in the ambulance.
They said you had another seizure, one that even the nurses were like...
They still talk about it at that hospital today. Like, they're like, well, that girl, she survived, like, the worst seizure ever. I'm like, how does everyone know about this? But
well, it's a small town. But so yeah, another really bad one in there.
They got me to the hospital, and they told my mom to not expect either me or the baby to survive. That's what they told them. And at this point, it was a Sabbath. So at this point, they had called the church where my family was, and like my dad and all the rest of my family was coming out to Kansas as fast as it's a 14-hour drive. So they were coming, and they prayed for us, and so basically they were just like, we need to be praying because they don't expect anyone to survive. And
so we sat in the waiting room for almost 2 hours for them before they came back with any news to us about if they're living or not, or how things went. And that was a very long time to sit there and wait. But and it didn't take them that long to get the baby out, but it took them a while to make sure everything was okay. And they came in, they got me, or they told me, they said, you had a little boy. We're going to have to fly him to Denver. Because he had swallowed so much meconium that he wasn't breathing for
over 10 minutes. He had no oxygen for over 10 minutes. So they said, even though he's somewhat not very stable right now, they said you need to expect the worst brain damage. Like they were trying to like explain to us, like he'll probably be like a vegetable. Like
and so they came and did that. And they didn't tell me how Rachel was doing at that point. It was another 10 or 15 minutes before they came back and said, your wife is doing okay. So there must have been a little bit of complications there, which I'm sure there was. And so when she was finally okay, they came back and got me and said, hey, the flight attendant's going to be here soon for your son. You can go in and you can hold his hand. You can hold your wife's hand and see how they're doing. And that's what I did. I was just, at that point in time, I was super relieved, super happy. They were both alive.
But they still kept telling us, especially with Zephaniah, both of us were on, like, I was on seizure watch for still a while, and they were like, he could still not make it, so don't, like, get too excited. Even if he does make it, they were like, it's going to be a very, very long road, is what they told us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, and then my worst fear is they said I can fly out with Zephaniah. Well, I don't really like airplanes. I had never been on an airplane. And
it's a small one too.
And it was a small one. And so I'm like, okay, so all these emotions, I'm trying to wrap my mind around the fact that I'm going to this big city, that I'm supposed to meet a cab. I'm supposed to get on an airplane. Yeah, I'm going to try to do all this, for a country boy, that it can be a lot sometimes. And so we finally, they showed up, and Zephaniah was a little difficult. They couldn't get IVs into him, so he ended up pushing our flight an hour later than what had planned. And so I was like, okay, all right, fine. And this was all happening. It was about, when we finally got to Denver, it was, what time was it?
2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. So, it's completely dark. Airport's shut down. And
they took him on a helicopter.
They took Zephaniah on a helicopter because they didn't have enough room for me to get on a helicopter. They had told me before we ever took a flight that they have a cab waiting. Well, because we were an hour behind, the cab was no longer there.
So you're stranded at the airport.
So I'm stranded at the airport, like, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, thankfully, one of the flight guys was there, and they were trying to help, and they couldn't get a cab, and the one guy, and his name was Ted.
He was the pilot.
He was one of the pilots. He said, you know what? I'm just going to take you there. It's a 45-minute drive. I'm just going to take you. I got nothing else to do. No big deal. And in that 5-minute drive, I was the most peace I had ever been. I got to talk with him about God, the goodness of God, basically the entire 45 minutes. You want to talk about a blessing. And so we got there fine. We got to the hospital. it was so late, only the emergency room was open. They were doing construction on the emergency room, so it was kind of chaotic trying to get in. But it turns out when you're with a flight attendant, they just start opening doors.
Well, Flight for Life.
Or Flight for Life.
Yeah.
And so we just start walking through until we find a security guard. And the guy passes me over, and I never seen Ted again.
And I looked at, like, afterwards, I tried to look for Ted, like, on the Flight for Life cruise and everything. And we didn't find any Ted. There was no Ted.
Yeah, there was nobody that looked like him.
But I looked up, like, what does Ted mean and what does Theodore mean? And it means gift from God.
And, so, and I didn't find this out until 3 days later when you finally joined me, because I was just telling her about it. And so, yeah, to look back and know that I had a 45-minute conversation with an angel, and in my personal opinion, pretty cool to get to see that and see how God was working. But that was only the beginning of the miracles that were happening through this birth with Zephaniah. And so I got up to the room. Everything was good. I mean, as good as could be. They kept telling me the same thing. You know, he's going to be, they had to put him on basically a cold mat to kind of keep his brain from swelling. So he was on that for 3 days with a lot of tubes going. He had the, what is it called?
The EEG.
He had but he had the thing that helps you breathe.
Oh, he had a CPAP.
Yeah, he had the CPAP.
He had to do all, like, the brain scans, the MRIs, the everything.
Yeah, they had a lot of machines hooked up to him. I think at one point in time there were 4 different machines in the room with him. And tubes, everything, a lot of tubes. So it was hard to even hold his hand because they had both hands. But through this time, Rachel was still 4 hours away. She couldn't leave the hospital there yet. And it took about 4 days before she was released. Yeah, I guess you could.
So then I'm like, so my family that was on Sabbath, and my family was all here on Sunday, and they came up to the hospital to see me, and then they came home. They were here on Sunday morning, and they were like, let's have a praise and worship session and praise God because of what he's done and that he's done so many miracles. And so they were downstairs in our basement, and they were praising and they were worshiping. And my sister, my older sister that sees, like, spiritual beings, she said she was sitting there, and all of a sudden hundreds and hundreds of angels started walking in. And she's like, they were just filing in. And she's like, and they were just kind of like talking amongst themselves. And she said, we're here to worship the good and the faithful, or something like that. And she was like, what are they talking about? And she said at the time she thought they were talking about, like, my family. Like, she's like, oh, is that us? But she said that wasn't the correct translation. She realized they kept worshiping, and she looked up and she saw a very bright light right behind my mom, like putting its hand on my mom's shoulder. And she's like, it was so bright. And she's like, that's Yeshua. And they were praising and worshiping, and Yeshua was amongst them, and there was just all these angels. And she said they were talking about Yeshua. They're here to worship and praise him. And she said when they were finished singing and the worshiping time was over, she's like, they all just left except for the two angels that had been there the whole time. And she's like, when she told us that, we were just all in tears. And she said she couldn't keep herself from crying. Like, she was just, like, in tears because, like, it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen. So that was pretty awesome just to hear that. I wasn't here for it, but
yeah, I mean, it was cool to me to hear that story. And yeah, it brings tears to my. I mean, it's a wonderful experience. I mean. And while that's happening, I'm there. I'm in Denver. I have no vehicle. In a hospital. Nobody, no contacts
that I know of. During COVID,
so things are locked down.
And the riots were
There
crazy.
There
in
were
Denver.
riots. I was told do not go outside the hospital after dark, because most likely you'll be robbed or worse. So it was one of those things. Yeah, I had to. If I went outside, or when I finally got a room at the Ronald McDonald, I had to leave plenty of time to make sure I was there before it got dark, and which it was only about 4 or 5 blocks away, so it wasn't too far. But yeah, all I could do in those 3 days was hold his hand. We sang a lot of praise songs, and I just got to hold his hand and talk to him. And it was really hard because as a father, you see your child there, and you know God is good, but at the same point you're watching him fight for his life, essentially. And the doctors are trying to be somewhat positive, but at the same point they're trying to be realistic and say these are expectations for a newborn without oxygen for 10 minutes. You don't expect much.
Yeah, and they told us like it'd be a minimum of 2 weeks at least of staying there.
Yeah, it'd be a minimum of 2 weeks, but honestly,
expect longer is what they kept telling us.
Expect a lot longer. And so yeah, I spent a lot of time praying, reading. It was in that time that God did reveal to me the scenarios, which, part of me felt been nice if he'd told me a little sooner. But he basically, it came down to the difference in the scenarios was me.
If you obeyed.
If I obeyed. Because in that long process of since we got married, I kind of just been, I could see it, but I'd kind of been like, basically wrestling and fighting with God about it. And so when I finally said yes to what he was asking of me to do, that was what changed it. That is what determined whether I was going to get to keep my wife and my child.
What was he asking you to do again? Will you remind us?
Mm-hmm.
He was asking me to keep Torah. He was asking me to obey him and do his ways. And
because he could see it, but he wasn't. He was like, yeah, it makes sense. I see it, but it's just not possible. It's just not possible. So he was making excuses. But when you finally said, "Oh, I'm going to actually do it,"
yeah. And at that point, when he finally revealed that to me, I broke down crying from it. I mean, I was super gracious, but also very aware that my actions on just determining whether I obey or not affect a lot of people around me, and it was a really good mind opening experience to the fact that my actions do really matter, and I knew that, but to the point of even obedience to God, it awoke me to a different thinking process with it. I don't really know what else to explain on that except for it just broke me in another way that God was showing me. And so in that, it gave me peace to know that my actions allowed me to keep my wife and child. But there were still a lot of things going on. In that time, he had an EKG, or anyways, they came in and put a monitor on his brain to monitor his brain waves. And it was supposed to be on there for a 24-hour period. They only had it on for 8 hours. It came back. He said, the doctor looked at me and said, I don't really understand what's going on. His brainwave is perfect. He's like a normal child. He's like, but as soon as he gets off of this, we're going to put him in the MRI to get a better read, because he's like, I don't know if we're having glitches or what's going on. And I at that point in time, I started smiling because I realized and I seen the miracles that were happening. And I just, nodded. But in my heart, I knew that God was performing a miracle that was beyond my belief. And I guess something else I should point out, is through my studies, I had been reading, through like David and all the really big miracles, a lot of big things that God did, a lot of power of which God would show. And I had been also asking God, show me your power. I want to see to the full extent what power you have. And through Zephaniah's birth, he was showing me his power and miracles and things that he can do that I knew he could do. The stories in the Bible that I'd seen him do, but I got to start seeing it firsthand, an experience of him showing me his power. Again, I will always say, sometimes you do need to be careful what you ask for. Just much like asking for patience. He will do things. He can answer those, and not always in ways that you think.
So sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but your conclusion about basically her not dying and things not being completely like them both dying, your conclusion was that's because you had started to like adopt some of the Torah. Is that basically what you concluded? But you weren't like fully sold out, so that's why it was still a suffering scenario. Is that kind of what your conclusion was, or?
My conclusion, because at that point when I said I was following God, I followed. There was no more. I started keeping Sabbath. I started changing a lot of things. People around me started thinking I was going crazy, was in a cult.
Well, and a lot of people like doubted, like they were like, it was almost like everything was going to go wrong now, and like God was going to show Kaiser through this birth. And there were some people that even said it's going to be a girl, and that's going to be God showing Kaiser that he's wrong in keeping the Torah.
Yeah, because I'd even people teased me, and I'd even told them, I said, well, according to what I feel God showed me, I'm going to have a boy. And so yeah, there was a lot. A lot of people thought I lost my faith, thought I very just gone off the deep end. And so there are a lot of people that believe that what happened to us was from basically walking away from God.
But we see it completely different.
But I see it completely different. And as far as like the suffering with it, whether it didn't matter how this was, whether and a lot of people believe that we should have went to the hospital. It didn't matter if we were going to go to the hospital or had a birth. I believe what God had set was unchangeable, and
the outcome was just whether we live or die was going to be
based off of if I finally just obeyed. And then as far as like the suffering and stuff, I believe God used that in my prayers for asking to see his power, to see his glory, to see his miracles being performed in such a mind-blowing way that the people around that weren't necessarily believers were like, what is going on here?
Yeah, well, because
this is unexplainable.
When I was in the hospital after Kaiser and Zephaniah had flown out, the nurse came in and she said to me, if anybody in that operating room did not believe that there was a God, they do now.
Yeah.
She said there's no denying it. You cannot see what we just all witnessed and not believe that there's not a God.
And obviously I don't know what happened in the operating room of what miracles were happening. Obviously there were miracles, but we don't know what they were.
And one of the other miracles was that the person who woke me up from when they put me under to do the C-section was actually one of our friends, and she was working that day. And it really, like, when you have that much fear and then you go under, when I woke up, I was kind of really confused. But when I saw her face, I was just like, okay, I know where I am. I know who this is. And I just thought that was really amazing that God put her there at that time.
Even though I think she would attest she would rather have not been there.
Yeah, she said she doesn't like to be there when her friends are in those situations.
So yeah.
So
basic. Go ahead.
So sorry. Okay, that makes sense. That all makes sense. So now back to Zephaniah. He's about to go into the MRI. Is that where we left off when
we were? Well, so we were at the point where they hadn't put him in the MRI. They had just come back with they had already put all the stuff on his head, a little machine to kind of regulate to see what he was doing. At that point, he was still on the cold pad. I think he had 1 day left before he came off of that. And so, yeah, when that happened, it came back. They took the machine off because they're like, there's no reason in monitoring. Either there's a glitch or he's perfectly fine. We're not really sure. The doctor, again, tried to reassure me. He's like, it seems normal, but I can't say that for sure. We're going to wait till another test. And, yeah, we just kind of kept, for the next day or two, kind of same routine. I was there by myself and just kept absorbing as much of his attention as I could and time. And you finally got released, and they drove you out, out there. And so you got to see him for the first time. I
didn't get to see him for like 3-4 days. So that was kind of torture. Yeah. That was really really hard. And
it was also really good timing because he was just coming off the cold pad, which then we could hold him. So it was a little bit frustrating for me though, because she got to hold him first, and I'd been there for 3 days. But they
had done the MRI before it came. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they had finally, because he had gotten off that, and so they were able to. We hadn't gotten any of the details of that yet, but it came pretty shortly. It came back. Yeah, they couldn't. There was no issues whatsoever. Yeah. They're like he was no brain damage whatsoever.
But they still made us sign up for like all the special needs baby classes and everything because they just couldn't believe it. Like they're like, well, everything looks normal, but he's probably going to be delayed. He could have cerebral palsy. He could have all these things. So you need to watch for these signs, and he needs to come back. And we never actually had to come back for anything.
Any of those.
Yeah.
And it was at that time that we'd already been there for he had been there for 5 days, and they just, for the next several days been on the same routine. He'd been on high flow oxygen at basically the highest percent he could be. They hadn't really, he'd kind of adjusted, but not a lot. So he was not really doing much on his own as far as breathing. And part of that was because so much meconium, they were trying to put stuff in his lungs to keep from the lungs getting an infection. And, but they kept telling me, yeah, you're gonna, just to bring a kid off of that much oxygen, it's going to take a minimum of 10 days. Mm-hmm. And by the time you showed up, they had already started trying to bring him back a little bit. And it was really slow. And I think that was a Thursday. And so then Friday, we had Thursday, Friday. Not much has really changed. Doctors hadn't really said a whole lot. Saturday morning.
And it's a weekend. So
it's a weekend, so you get a different doctor, the weekend doctor.
And the weekend doctor usually doesn't like to change things because they're like, oh, I'm not the doctor that's here. So we were really, really hoping that we could go home soon. So we really wanted him off of that. But we're like, the odds of them changing it on the weekend isn't very high.
Isn't likely. And so the doctor comes in that morning. And she started talking to what?
I prayed right at that moment. I was like, God, there's been so many miracles. Can I see one more? And I felt a presence. Like, I don't know if the Holy Spirit is what I'm assuming. I felt it right then when the doctor came in.
And the doctor, she started talking to her nurse as far as what was going on. And all of a sudden, she stopped the nurse. And she says, I know this baby. And I turned to Rachel, quietly, like, she's never been here.
And the nurse told the doctor, the nurse said, no, you've never met this baby. He's a new baby.
Yeah, and she's like, no, I've met this baby. And she basically abruptly, she pushes her little cart out of the way, walks in.
She said she had a dream.
Looks at him and looks back at the nurse and says, you remember that dream? You remember that baby I was telling you about in my dream? And she said, this is that baby. And the nurse is like, okay, I don't understand what's going on. We're both sitting here kind of like, that's interesting. okay, I mean, we've been seeing all these miracles going on. What's going on now? And she's like, yep, I know this baby. And instantly said, he's coming off of oxygen today. Going from high flow, within an hour, he was breathing on his own.
They all thought she was crazy.
They thought she was nuts, but she's like, he's done. He doesn't need it. Boom. The room went from multiple machines down to none.
Yeah.
And yeah, they went out. It was another mind-blowing miracle because we just got to witness God using somebody else. And whoops.
Is that him right now?
This is the baby.
This is a new baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 boys and a girl.
So
after all that, you didn't mind having another one. So this is post your next one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. People think we're crazy for having another, but we trust God. We do.
Well, I think it's just another act of what God is saying. Listen, you're not the one in control. I am. And but yeah, Zephaniah with the doctor, it was just another miracle that we got to see, and he used somebody else in the field, and she acted on what she saw. It was a completely a hand of God, 100%, all the way through it. And after all of it, we basically it came down to a lot of miracles, God proving to me his power, showing other people his power, using people, and also it was a spiritual warfare for Zephaniah. As time went on, he's perfectly healthy, perfectly normal boy now, no complications. But, and this is something that lays on my heart heavy still, Satan didn't want him in this world for some reason. There was a lot of spiritual warfare around him, and I believe that God does have a plan for Zephaniah, and that plan required me obeying and serving him his way, to train him the way he needed him trained. So it's a huge blessing kind of on my shoulders, a weight, but there's still a lot to go with this little boy.
The responsibility is great, man. The responsibility is
yes. Great. And it's been a journey with him. It's been a journey for me, trying to continue seeking God and learning, but still a lot of trials with it and testings. It's been an interesting road, because after his birth, after we got him home, there were still a lot of spiritual battles going on, and a lot of testings of my faith going along with it. We've just recently, on the farm, gone through about a 3-year drought period. Some of the most intense droughts that this area has ever seen. I've got old timers telling me we've never seen it like this before. So there's been a lot going on around it. And all in all, still teaching me to just keep trusting God. But that's kind of the storyline.
Wow. All right. So how old is he now, and how long then have you been doing this?
So he is about 3.5 years. So I've basically been doing it about 4 years now.
Okay.
Because we're coming up on about the time when, I think February, March is when I started. When I finally just decided to start obeying.
So how has your life changed then personally since after this event and after coming into the Torah? What has happened, especially with the people you know? How are they reacting to you now?
Well, now things are getting a little bit better. I think people are starting to recognize that I still profess that Christ is a savior. But there's still people who disagree with me. And so it's a challenge to work with them. As far as like farming, my boss isn't a believer, so he was like, well, whatever, but it's kind of weird, and so we've been able to work that out. He doesn't fully understand like the feast days, and then we don't celebrate Christmas or all the other holidays, and so there's a little bit of awkwardness, but he's starting to adjust to it. Directly after it, it was hard. There were a lot of emotions with it. A lot of I'm not so sure what he's thinking, and even to this day, a lot of my friends and family do not know Zephaniah's story, mostly because I've never really felt. I've tried to tell it, but it always got cut off, and so I'm not sure when they're going to know it. Maybe they'll watch the video. I don't know, but it's still kind of a work in progress there.
Do you have any words of encouragement for people who are in a similar situation, or I don't know, they're facing some foreboding challenge, or even if they're undergoing spiritual attack like you were before this?
Yeah, the most I can say to it is you have to just keep trusting God through the storms. Continue seeking Him, reading His Word, praying, and there will be a lot of days through that time that you're not going to want to. It's a battle, 100%. But God, you stay faithful. God will get you through it, even though it seems really dark. That's really all I would have to say, or for advice. Just and seek friends, seek somebody who can help build into you if you need as an encouragement. But mostly, you just gotta even when you don't want to, you just have to keep reading the Word and trusting Him. All the way through it. I can look back on what has happened, even in the time that it was, even going through it, there were a lot of hard times with it, but I wouldn't want to go back and change it. I see it as a blessing because I came out stronger, getting to see the miracles, getting to see God work in those ways, but also the peace that came with it. There's a lot of hard challenges, but it, in the end, made me a lot stronger. So I wouldn't want to change it, but I also wouldn't really want anybody else to have to go through some of the heartache either. But there is blessings with it sometimes.
So okay, here's a more general question just about the Torah thing.
Okay.
Why do you think people are seeing this now, or you're seeing this now, and by and large nobody was noticing this stuff a dozen years ago, 20 years ago? I mean, largely. I know there have been groups that have way before this, but
That's a good question. Honestly, I think as time is progressing, we're obviously getting closer to the end when Yeshua will be back. I think God's awakening people to show. I think He's stopping Satan from running things in a sense of an antichrist. He's starting to show people the truth, and there are people who are seeking God and reading their Word and saying, God, what's going on? And I think that's a lot of it. I think a lot of it is just people are reading the Word of God and seeking him, and God is saying, hey, here it is. Are you willing to follow or not? And I think it's just changing. I can say, yeah, I think God was trying to speak to me probably more than 8 years ago. I think he keeps doing that. So
What would you say to a Christian, mainstream Christian, who starts to notice this stuff but just thinks, man, this is inconvenient. This is extremely inconvenient for my business, for example, or whatever it might be. Or maybe I love crab or something. Like, what would you say to someone who's like, I think this might be true, but it's inconvenient?
Once you start doing it, it's not inconvenient. To tell somebody, listen, it feels like you're giving up all these things, but when you stop and you start doing it, God fills those voids with his presence of blessings towards you doing what he's asking of you to do. Anytime you do what God asks, God provides you with the peace and the plentiful of whatever to do it. And even though it does seem inconvenient, and I know in my business with farming, it can be hard to take the Sabbath rest, to take the feast, because the feasts are always during my harvest season, my busiest season. But in looking at it, it's a way of me stopping my busy life and turning it to him. It's all about us focusing on God instead of us just focusing on ourselves and putting God second. It's about putting him first. So to tell somebody that and to try to get him to grasp it, I guess I would try to tell him, you stop putting yourself beforehand. Forget your stuff. Put God first and let him lead.
Are you glad that you did that?
Yes, I am. I'm very glad. And in more ways than just one, having my wife and son. There has been a lot of blessings with just doing it. One, I'm not fighting with God. When you're battling God and you're not exactly, it can be very stressful, and it takes a lot of energy. And so to just be basically like, you know what, God, it's your way, and to just do it, there's still hardships with it, but there's a lot more peace, a lot more comfort. Since I started keeping Sabbath, man, I love Sabbath. I enjoy knowing the day is coming that I get to be home, and I'm going to just take that whole day and be with my family. And sometimes that means I might sleep half the day too, just because we're there. But it's something I look forward to. I look forward to the feast because they're feast of God, because they're meaningful to things that have happened over the course of time and things that are yet to come. And again, it's what God asked. I take great pleasure in doing the things that God has asked of his people to do. And I am his people, one of his people. So
that's cool. Would you like to add anything else to anybody listening? Or do you think Rachel wants to say anything else if she gets time?
I imagine she's still feeding the baby. So I would imagine she got to say what she wanted, and she'll lean a lot along what I'm saying. So I think we're not too much more to add to the story.
Well, Kaiser, thank you for taking the time to talk with me, man.
Yes, thank you for taking the time. I'm glad we were able to finally get it done. Honestly, I was a bit skeptical about doing all this, but I think it was good.
Well, I'm glad we got to hear your story, and I appreciate it. If you love what we're doing, please like this video, share, and subscribe. These words, you hear all YouTubers say them all the time, and it's because it helps that YouTube channel if you do these things. And it helps not just grow the audience, but it helps get this information in front of more people. So join us and do that, please. And if you really love what we're doing, you could always consider signing up for our Patreon and joining us for our monthly digital meetups. The next one is in a week. You can find that at patreon.com/thelifewithluke.